Dad shoved me through the glass door and said I was worthless. I smiled as blood dripped down my face. You just gave up everything, I told him. That night, I revealed who truly owned their empire, and by morning, their perfect life had completely crumbled. The sound of shattering glass still echoes in my ears, but it's the cold fury in my father's eyes and the warm blood on my face that I'll never forget. Because as he stood over me, calling me worthless, I just smiled, surrounded by glittering shards, and whispered, "You just lost everything." That single, violent moment was the culmination of years, decades, even of buried truths and simmering betrayals. To truly understand how I, Sarah Lancaster, 28 years old, brought down my family's empire overnight, we have to go back. Way back. I was born into an almost unbelievable privilege, the only child of Richard and Alara Lancaster. My father, Richard, had taken my grandfather Arthur's humble medical device company, started 40 years prior in a garage, and scaled it into a technological titan, Lancaster Technologies. By the time I arrived, our home was a sprawling 20,000 square foot estate, perched regally over the Pacific. My earliest, most cherished memories are of sitting on grandfather Arthur's knee. He'd meticulously explain how our devices, these intricate pieces of engineering, literally saved lives. "Sarah," he'd say, his eyes crinkling with wisdom and warmth, "one day, all of this will be yours to protect. Remember, business is about more than just profit. It's about purpose." My mother, Alara, truly was the heart of our family. She instilled in me the profound understanding that our privilege wasn't a free pass, but a profound responsibility. She donated millions to children's hospitals, and every Christmas, she'd take me, her little shadow, to deliver gifts there. "Look them in the eyes," she'd instruct, "every single person deserves dignity." Then, everything shattered when I turned 12. My mother, Alara, was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. 3 agonizing months later, she was gone. The light went out of our home. My father, Richard, retreated into the cold comfort of his work, leaving me utterly alone to navigate the gaping void of my grief. I'd hide in her closet, burying my face in her clothes, desperate to cling to the fading scent of her perfume, desperately trying to conjure the sound of her laugh. And then came Vanessa. Just 11 months, 11 short months, after my mother's funeral, my father introduced me to his new girlfriend. 6 weeks later, they were married. She was 20 years his junior, with perfectly manicured nails that felt like claws digging into my shoulder during forced photo ops. "We are going to be such good friends," she'd coo, her voice saccharine, while the cameras flashed. 2 days later, her son, Justin, a handsome 17-year-old, moved into our home. He instantly became the sun around which my father's world revolved. What began as showing him the ropes at the company quickly morphed into grooming him as the heir apparent. I was systematically pushed to the margins, a forgotten figure in the background of our staged family photos. Despite being sidelined, I didn't just survive, I excelled. I graduated high school as valedictorian, earned my business degree from Stanford with highest honors, and had my MBA by 23. While Justin drifted through a mediocre business degree at the local university, I was already developing patents that would become cornerstone products for Lancaster Technologies. My grandfather Arthur, bless his soul, always saw something in me. Before his passing, when I was 18, he'd sneak me into board meetings. "Watch how they negotiate," he'd whisper. "Notice who speaks and who listens." The other board members would just smile, humoring grandfather Arthur and his little shadow. They had no idea I was absorbing everything. One of those board members, Marcus Chin, became my confidant and mentor after grandfather Arthur passed. When I finished my MBA, it was Marcus who helped me secure a position at a competing firm. "Your father needs to see your value from the outside," Marcus explained over coffee, echoing grandfather Arthur's own advice. Sometimes, family can't recognize the talent right in front of them. I spent 4 intense years building my reputation in the industry, developing innovations that put my name on the map, entirely separate from the Lancaster legacy. Trade journals featured my work. Competitors tried to poach me. All this while Justin, somehow, was given increasing authority at Lancaster, despite a string of embarrassing, failed product launches. Olivia Reed, my grandfather's former assistant, who still worked at the company, would call me with updates. "Your father approved another $3 million for Justin's pet project today," she'd sigh. The board is getting nervous, but no one dares challenge Richard directly. By the time I turned 27, the company I loved, Lancaster Technologies, was clearly faltering. A concerning pattern of declining innovation and market share had emerged. I knew it was time to return. My father, Richard, reluctantly offered me a position, Special Projects Manager. No team, a tiny office in the basement. "Be grateful," he snapped when I questioned the demotion. "Most people would kill for a foot in the door here." What he didn't know is that I had spent years preparing for this exact moment. I'd studied every facet of the business, understood our products better than anyone alive, save perhaps grandfather Arthur. And more ominously, I'd begun to suspect something was deeply, profoundly wrong with the company's finances. I accepted the position with a serene smile. "Thank you for the opportunity, Dad," I said, watching the flicker of surprise in his eyes at my easy acquiescence. "I won't disappoint you." It was the last promise I would ever keep to him. My first 6 months back at Lancaster Technologies were a brutal masterclass in corporate politics. I kept my head down, worked brutal hours, systematically absorbing every nuance of the company's current operations. My tiny basement office became my command center, walls plastered with product development timelines, market analyses, and intricate organizational charts. If they thought I was just trying to prove myself, all the better. Our cardiovascular device division was in freefall. Sales had plummeted 30% over 2 years, and a major hospital chain was threatening to jump ship. I spent my weekends devouring patient outcomes, consulting doctors, dissecting competitor products. The problem stared me in the face. Our reliable devices hadn't evolved with new surgical techniques. So, I developed a prototype for a modified device, perfect for minimally invasive procedures. After rigorous testing and refinement, I presented the concept to the division head. He was impressed. Resources were allocated. Within 4 months, we had a working prototype that surgeons raved about. The morning of the quarterly board meeting, I was poised to present our solution, the projected revenue recovery. But when I arrived at the boardroom, my father, Richard, was already there, presenting my work. My slides. My research. My prototype clutched in his hands. As I have been directing the team, he smoothly announced, "We have developed a solution to the cardiovascular division challenges." I stood frozen in the doorway, a ghost. Board members nodded, scribbling notes. Marcus caught my eye, a slight frown creasing his brow, but said nothing. When my father finished, applause erupted. "Sarah," he finally acknowledged my presence, a condescending smirk on his face. "Nice of you to join us. Take a seat if you can find one." The only empty chair was shoved in a corner, miles from the table. I sat quietly, a professional smile plastered on my face, while a cold, furious rage ignited within me. After the meeting, I confronted him in his office. "Those were my designs," I stated, my voice dangerously calm. "My research, my prototype." He barely glanced up from his computer. "You work for Lancaster Technologies. Everything you develop belongs to the company." "To me." "I deserve credit for my work," I insisted. Finally, he looked up, irritation etched on his face. "You know what you deserve? To be grateful. I gave you any position here at all. Justin would have solved the cardiovascular problem eventually, in time for our largest client to walk away." His face hardened. "Go back to your little projects, Sarah. The adults are running the business." The very next week, company-wide emails announced Justin's promotion to Executive Vice President of Product Development, citing his innovative solution to the cardiovascular division crisis as proof of his leadership. My name appeared nowhere. That very night, the phone rang. It was Olivia. "Are you sitting down?" she asked, her voice hushed. My stomach clenched. "What happened?" "I was cleaning out some old storage files," she explained, "and found something you need to see. It's about your grandfather's will." We met at a discreet coffee shop a few blocks from the office. Olivia handed me a manila envelope. "These are copies," she said. I put the originals back exactly where I found them. Inside was a draft of Grandfather Arthur's will, dated 2 months before his death. It explicitly stated that his controlling shares of Lancaster Technologies should be held in trust until I reached 30, then transfer directly to me. My breath hitched. "This was never executed," I whispered, flipping through the pages. "The will that went through probate left everything to my father." Olivia nodded grimly. "There's more. Keep reading." The envelope also contained a series of damning emails between my father, Richard, and the family attorney, dated just days after Grandfather Arthur's death. They discussed modifications to the will before filing, ensuring continuity of leadership without complications. "He changed the will," I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. "It appears so," Olivia confirmed. "And there's something else. The company financial reports, they have inconsistencies. Small enough to miss if you aren't looking closely, but they've been growing." The next day, I ran into Vanessa in the executive wing. She stopped me with a perfectly manicured hand on my arm. "Sarah, darling," she purred, "we haven't had a proper chat in ages. Lunch this week." Curious, and against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at an exclusive downtown restaurant where she ordered a $100 bottle of wine before noon. "I worry about you," she said, studying me over her crystal glass. "All work and no social life." At your age, I was already married. "I'm focused on my career," I countered, my jaw tight. "Yes, but is it making you happy? You keep pushing for recognition, and your father can't give it to you." I slowly set down my fork. "Can't or won't." Her smile tightened, brittle. "Richard built this company into what it is today. It pains him to see you constantly challenging his decisions. Justin knows how to support your father, rather than compete with him." "Is that what you think I'm doing?" I asked, my voice laced with ice. "Competing?" "Darling," she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "we both know you've always wanted what Richard built. But some things aren't meant to be. Perhaps if you found fulfillment elsewhere, you wouldn't need to prove yourself here." In that exact moment, her mask slipped. I saw the cold, calculated ambition behind her eyes, the protective mother ensuring her son's inheritance. I smiled pleasantly. "Thank you for your concern, Vanessa. I'll give it some thought." As we parted ways, she added, "Your father is under tremendous pressure. Try not to add to his burden with unrealistic expectations." I knew then. This was a warning. That afternoon, with Vanessa's veiled threat still ringing in my ears, I began compiling a list of potential allies within the company. Division heads who'd praised my work, engineers who respected my technical knowledge, administrative staff loyal to Grandfather Arthur's memory. I would need every single one of them if my suspicions proved correct. My most surprising ally emerged 2 weeks later during a product safety review. Ethan Davis, recently hired into the legal department, sharply questioned some contract language that seemed specifically designed to obscure liability. We ended up working late, fueled by takeout, as we meticulously revised documentation. "This isn't my first rodeo with vague safety language," he said, loosening his tie. "My last firm specialized in corporate malfeasance cases." "Defending the corporations?" I asked cautiously. "Sometimes," he replied, his eyes piercing, "and sometimes helping whistleblowers." He studied me for a moment. "The cardiovascular device modifications, those were yours, weren't they?" "Not Justin's." I stiffened. "What makes you say that?" "The technical language in the specifications," he stated simply. "Justin can barely explain how the devices work in layman's terms, let alone articulate the engineering principles." I said nothing, but Ethan nodded, as if my silence confirmed everything. "Corporate families are complicated," he mused. "I've seen how they can rot from the inside." Over the next several weeks, with Ethan's implicit backing, I began noticing deeply disturbing financial patterns. Research funds allocated to phantom projects that produced zero results. Exorbitant consulting fees paid to companies that seemed to exist only on paper. Offshore accounts receiving regular, untraceable transfers for international market development in countries where we had absolutely no presence. Each discovery was a chilling piece of a puzzle I wasn't yet ready to assemble. But the picture emerging looked increasingly like systematic, brazen fraud, with my own father, Richard, at its very center. I needed undeniable, ironclad evidence before I could make my move. All the while, I continued producing exceptional work, building my reputation within the company, while outwardly appearing to accept my limited, overlooked role. Justin took credit for 2 more of my innovations. My father denied every single one of my requests for a team. Vanessa hosted lavish parties where I was pointedly seated far from any potential networking opportunities. But I was patient. I was watching. The truth was coming into focus, one sickening betrayal at a time. 6 months after my return, Lancaster Technologies hosted its annual charity gala. The event was Vanessa's absolute pride and joy, a $500,000 spectacle designed to generate both donations for children's medical research and glowing press coverage for the company. Executives, board members, major clients, and local politicians packed the grand ballroom of the city's most exclusive hotel. I wore a simple black gown, elegant but deliberately understated. Justin arrived with his date, a model whose name he clearly kept forgetting. My father, Richard, and Vanessa made their grand entrance a dramatic 30 minutes late, ensuring every eye in the room was fixed on them. From my table at the periphery, I watched the sickening performance of the perfect family. "They do put on quite a show," Marcus murmured beside me. As one of the few board members who dared question my father's recent decisions, he too found himself increasingly marginalized. "The Lancaster legacy on full display," I replied, taking a slow sip of champagne, trying to keep my voice even. "Not the full legacy," Marcus said, meaningfully. "Your grandfather, Arthur, would have handled things very differently." Midway through dinner, I excused myself, ostensibly for the restroom. Instead, I slipped into a service corridor and made my way to the hotel's business center. Using the access code Olivia had provided, I logged into the Lancaster Technologies secure server. For what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 minutes, I systematically downloaded financial documents from restricted folders. My hands trembled slightly as the reports filled the screen. Company funds diverted through a complex web of shell subsidiaries, research budgets brazenly manipulated, tax documents altered. The small irregularities I'd noticed were just the tip of a massive, systematic fraud spanning years. As I was about to log out, one more folder caught my eye: Arthur Estate. Inside was the smoking gun. The original version of my grandfather's will, exactly as Olivia had described, explicitly leaving controlling interest to me upon my 30th birthday. Alongside it, meticulous documentation of how it had been altered after his death. I transferred everything to an encrypted drive, my heart thundering, and returned to the gala. My expression was carefully neutral, a mask. When Justin, already slurring, drunkenly clinked his glass to make an impromptu speech about continuing the Lancaster legacy of innovation, I applauded politely, while mentally calculating how many federal laws my father had broken. The evening concluded with my father announcing a new children's hospital wing, named, sickeningly, after Vanessa. The irony was unbearable. My mother, Alara, had dedicated her life to those hospitals. Now Vanessa was literally putting her name on her legacy, too. The audacity, the disrespect, was a physical blow. As guests began to depart, my father, Richard, summoned key executives to our home for his infamous nightcap strategy discussions. These after-parties were where the real business decisions were forged, over expensive scotch and veiled threats. For once, I was included, perhaps because excluding the only Lancaster actually present at the founding family's table would have been too blatant an insult to the influential clients still lingering. Our sprawling family estate was ablaze with lights as luxury cars swept into the circular driveway. Staff took coats, served drinks, a picture of old money grandeur. I watched my father hold court, board members and executives fawning, laughing at his stale jokes, vying for his approval. The sheer power he wielded over them was intoxicating, sickening. Around midnight, as the discussions fragmented into smaller, drunken groups, I slipped away to my father's home office. I needed one final piece of evidence: bank statements proving his personal financial benefit from the corporate fraud. I knew he kept hard copies in his desk, too paranoid to leave everything in digital form. I was snapping photos with my phone, my heart pounding, when the door swung open. My father stood there, a glass of scotch in his hand, his expression morphing from surprise to incandescent rage. "What are you doing in here?" he roared. I straightened, my phone sliding into my pocket, my own heart rate surprisingly steady. "Looking for the Anderson proposal you mentioned earlier." "In my desk drawers?" he sneered. We stared at each other, the decades of pretense between us finally, irrevocably crumbling. I thought of all the times I'd sought his approval, his recognition. All the brilliant work I'd done for his company. All the insidious lies he'd told, the legacy he'd corrupted. "I know about Grandfather Arthur's will," I said quietly, my voice cutting through the tension like a razor. "The real one." Color drained from his face, leaving it ashen. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, I think I do. I know about the offshore accounts, the diverted research funds, the tax fraud." He carefully, deliberately, set his glass down. "You think you understand business at your age? Sometimes complex strategies look questionable to inexperienced eyes." "Fraud looks like fraud to federal prosecutors," I countered, my voice hardening. His expression turned to stone. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm telling you the truth about everything, including how you built your precious empire on stolen inheritance and criminal activity." "You ungrateful little..." He stopped himself, visibly struggling to rein in his fury. "Everything I did was to build this company, to create a legacy. A legacy you stole from me. You..." He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You could never handle what I've built. You're too much like your mother. Soft. Sentimental. This company needs a strong leader. Like Justin." I shot back, "The alcoholic who takes credit for other people's work?" His face flushed a dangerous, dark red. "At least he understands loyalty. Is that what you call it?" I asked, my voice dripping with scorn. "I call it enabling criminal behavior." He stepped toward me, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "You will not threaten this family. Everything you have, I gave you." "No," I countered, my own voice rising. "Everything I should have had, you took from me." Something snapped in his eyes. "You are nothing without the Lancaster name. Nothing." He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. I instinctively pulled away, but his rage was fully unleashed now. As I turned to flee, he shoved me, hard, toward the door. But instead of opening, the heavy wooden door held firm. My momentum carried me forward, and I crashed, violently, through the glass panel beside it. The sound was deafening. Sharp pain exploded across my back and arms as glittering shards rained down. I landed hard on the hallway floor, stunned, disoriented. A warm wetness spread across my face. Blood. A horrifying silence fell. Party guests, their champagne glasses frozen midair, turned to stare. Vanessa appeared in the living room doorway, a hand flying to her mouth. Justin stood behind her, eyes wide, disbelieving. My father stood frozen, too, in the doorway of his office, the full, sickening realization of what he'd done slowly dawning on his face. For a fleeting moment, he looked exactly like the frightened, pathetic old man he was. All illusions of power stripped away by one horrific act of violence. I touched my face, my fingers coming away smeared red. Strangely, a calm, almost serene, smile spread across my lips. I looked up at him, blood trickling down my cheek, and whispered, "You just lost everything." Vanessa, ever the performer, rushed forward, all theatrical concern for the watching guests. She tripped, she announced loudly, her voice shrill. "Too much champagne. Let's get you cleaned up, Sarah." No one moved to help me stand. I rose slowly, the tinkling sound of glass falling from my dress, blood dripping onto the polished marble floor. Justin stepped forward, perhaps to guide me away from the shocked onlookers. But I shook my head, my gaze unwavering. "Don't touch me," I said, my voice clear and firm. "None of you. Don't touch me." I walked straight through the stunned crowd, head held high, feeling the blood drying on my skin like a badge. Behind me, I heard my father, his voice hollow, instructing guests that the party was over. Vanessa's nervous, brittle laughter. Justin, frantically offering to drive someone home. In the privacy of my own bathroom, I surveyed the damage. Dozens of small cuts crisscrossed my arms and back. A deeper gash, the source of most of the blood, ran along my hairline. As I painstakingly removed glass fragments and disinfected the wounds, my decision solidified. Years of theft, fraud, lies, manipulation. It would all end tonight. I had everything I needed now, including a house full of shocked witnesses to my father's violence. The carefully constructed facade of Lancaster family perfection had shattered, along with that glass door. By morning, the empire would follow. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The throbbing pain from my cuts kept me alert, but it was raw adrenaline and an ironclad resolve that truly kept exhaustion at bay. After treating the worst of my injuries, I changed into practical, dark clothes and began executing the plan I'd been mentally refining for months. First, I backed up all the evidence I'd gathered to 3 separate, secure locations: one cloud server, one physical drive hidden in my apartment, and, crucially, one set of documents I'd mailed to Ethan's personal address days earlier as insurance. If anything happened to me, those instructions would ensure everything reached the proper authorities. As I worked, memories surfaced unbidden. Grandfather Arthur showing me the very first medical device he ever patented, my mother Alara's gentle, unwavering guidance. The chilling moment I realized my father saw me as competition, not his daughter. The slow, agonizing erosion of my place in my own family. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Are you all right?" Hearing concerning rumors about an incident at the gala. I responded, briefly, "I am fine. Be ready tomorrow. Everything changes." She replied immediately, "Whatever you need." Olivia had been fiercely loyal to Grandfather Arthur for 30 years. When he died, she stayed at Lancaster Technologies, partly out of loyalty to his memory, and partly, I now suspected, to keep a watchful eye on my father. She'd seen the company change under his leadership, witnessed the gradual, insidious shift from patient-focused innovation to profit-driven shortcuts. I thought back to a conversation we'd had 6 months earlier, shortly after I'd returned. We were reviewing old product development files when she suddenly closed the folder. "Your grandfather had a saying," she told me, "never mistake the name on the building for ownership of what happens inside it." What did he mean? I'd asked. Lancaster Technologies, she'd explained, belongs to the patients whose lives depend on our products, to the employees who dedicate their careers to the mission, to the principles of innovation and integrity. She fixed me with a meaningful look. He did not build this company for one person to treat as a personal kingdom. That conversation had stayed with me, a constant echo, reinforcing my growing suspicions about my father's management. Now, as the first hint of dawn approached, I gathered the final pieces of my plan. At 4:30 a.m., I called Marcus Chen. He answered on the second ring, his voice surprisingly alert despite the hour. "I saw what happened," he said without preamble. "Are you injured?" "Nothing serious," I replied, my voice steady, "but I need to meet with you before the markets open. I've discovered significant irregularities in the company finances." Criminal irregularities. There was a significant pause on the line. "I've had concerns for some time. Your father has been blocking full financial reviews." "I have the evidence," I stated. "All of it." Another pause. "My home office. 6 a.m. Bring everything." Next, I contacted 3 other board members I believed would prioritize the company's survival over loyalty to my father. Brief, careful messages requesting urgent meetings regarding material financial concerns. 2 responded immediately, agreeing to conference calls later that morning. At 5:15 a.m., I reached out to Ethan Davis. Despite the early hour, he answered promptly. "I need legal counsel," I said, unofficially, "before I take official action." "Is this about what I think it is?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Yes. And more. There was an incident last night." "I heard whispers," he said, his tone grim. "How badly are you hurt?" "I'll live. Can you meet me at my apartment in 30 minutes? It's secure, and I have what you might need." What Ethan had was invaluable experience with corporate whistleblower cases. Before joining Lancaster Technologies, he had helped expose similar fraud at 2 other major companies. He'd been hired during a period when my father was traveling, his resume approved by the head of legal, who had since been conveniently pushed into early retirement. When I arrived at his apartment, he took one look at my face, the bandage at my hairline, and wordlessly poured me a cup of coffee. "Start from the beginning," he said, pulling out a legal pad. "Everything you found, and everything that happened last night." For 45 intense minutes, I laid out the evidence, the financial discrepancies, the altered will, the insidious pattern of control and isolation, and finally, the violent culmination at the gala after-party. "You have enough for the SEC, the IRS, and likely criminal charges," he confirmed, meticulously reviewing my documentation. "But you need to consider what this means. Going public burns everything to the ground. The company's stock will plummet. Jobs could be lost. Your family name tarnished permanently." "I have considered all of that," I replied, my gaze meeting his. "I've also considered what happens if this continues. Patient safety compromised for profit. Employees unwittingly working for a criminal enterprise. Grandfather Arthur's legacy corrupted beyond all recognition." Ethan studied me for a long moment. "There is no halfway option here, Sarah. Once you pull this trigger, you cannot take it back." "I know. And you're ready for the personal cost? Your father will likely face prison. Your relationship with your family destroyed forever." I touched the bandage on my forehead, feeling the sting of the cut beneath. "That relationship was destroyed long ago. I just didn't want to admit it." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure this is done right. Maximum impact, minimum legal exposure for you." Together, Ethan and I meticulously crafted the communications for each recipient. The SEC would receive comprehensive financial records. The board members would get summary evidence and emergency protocols for company stabilization. Select journalists would receive carefully curated information packages, timed for release after official investigations began. "What about your claim to controlling interest?" Ethan asked, referencing the altered will. "One battle at a time," I said, my voice firm. "First, we stop the criminal activity. Then we can address ownership through proper legal channels." By 9 a.m., I had met with Marcus and another trusted board member, Maria Lopez. Both were ashen-faced after reviewing my evidence. "We will need to call an emergency board meeting," Marcus declared. "Suspend Richard pending investigation." "He will fight it," Maria warned. "Let him," I replied, my gaze steady. "The evidence speaks for itself." At 10 a.m., I returned to my apartment for final preparations. My phone was a frantic testament to the brewing storm. 23 missed calls from my father, 12 from Vanessa, 9 from Justin. I ignored them all. Instead, I called 3 journalists renowned for their thorough reporting on corporate malfeasance. Each conversation was brief, professional, and ended with scheduled delivery of documentation later that day. As noon approached, a flicker of hesitation, an almost imperceptible tremor, passed through me. Was I truly ready to dismantle my family in such a public, devastating way? Then I remembered Grandfather Arthur's unwavering integrity, my mother Alara's profound compassion, the very values they had instilled in me, now so utterly betrayed by my father's greed. I remembered the sickening crunch of glass shattering against my skin. The look in my father's eyes, not of remorse, but of pure, unadulterated rage that I had provoked him into revealing his true, monstrous nature. I made one final call to Olivia. "It's happening today," I told her, my voice low. "Be prepared for chaos." "I have been prepared for years, Sarah," she replied, her voice remarkably steady. "Your grandfather would be proud." At 12:30 p.m., I sent the first batch of irrefutable evidence to the SEC through their whistleblower portal. At 12:45 p.m., I emailed comprehensive documentation to the 7 board members I trusted implicitly. At 1 p.m., I provided secure access to selected documents to the journalists. Then I waited, knowing with absolute certainty that the carefully constructed empire of lies was about to collapse. The first domino fell at 2:17 p.m. My phone rang. It was Marcus. "The SEC has contacted legal," he stated, without preamble. "They are requesting all financial records be preserved immediately. Richard is being summoned to an emergency board meeting at 4. "Has he responded?" I asked, my heart hammering. Not yet. His assistant says he's in meetings off-site. My father was, no doubt, in full damage control mode, frantically trying to identify the source of the leak. He wouldn't suspect me, not yet. Anyway, convinced his violent display last night had put me firmly back in my place. Keep me informed, I told Marcus. And, thank you for doing the right thing. This company was your grandfather's life's work, he replied, his voice heavy. Someone needs to save it from your father. At 3:30 p.m., Ethan texted, "Federal agents just entered the building. Executive floor in lockdown. Files being secured." Things were moving even faster than anticipated. I'd expected at least a full day before federal involvement became visible. Someone on the board must have made additional calls, perhaps to the FBI or the Department of Justice itself. My phone rang again. Justin. For the 10th time, I declined the call. By 4 p.m., I needed to retrieve the final, crucial pieces of evidence from my father's home. With everyone's attention fixed on the corporate headquarters, the family estate would likely be deserted. I took a rideshare, not my own car, to avoid recognition and had the driver drop me 2 blocks away. The house was unnervingly quiet as I approached. Staff would be minimal on a weekday afternoon. I used my key to enter through the side door near the kitchen, listening intently for any movement. Hearing nothing but the echo of my own breath, I made my way to my father's home office. The glass door had been hastily boarded up with plywood. Dried blood still stained the marble floor where I had fallen. I stepped carefully around it and entered the office. My father's desk appeared untouched from the night before. I went directly to the hidden safe behind the hunting painting, another of Grandfather Arthur's traditions my father had co-opted without ever understanding its true significance. The combination? Grandfather Arthur's birthday. A detail my father had kept out of sheer sentimentality, or, more likely, laziness. Inside the safe, I found precisely what I was looking for, the original copy of my grandfather's will, complete with my father's handwritten notes indicating the changes to be made. Next to it sat a small leather journal Grandfather Arthur had kept, meticulously documenting his intentions for the company's succession. And beside that, account information for private offshore holdings where company funds had been brazenly diverted. I photographed everything, then carefully replaced the items, except for the journal, which I slipped into my bag. It wasn't technically evidence of crimes, but it was my birthright, a tangible piece of my grandfather's true wishes. As I closed the safe and replaced the painting, I heard a door close somewhere else in the house. Footsteps approached down the hallway. I quickly moved behind the large desk, crouching out of sight. The office door opened. From my hiding place, I could see Justin's expensive shoes step inside. He moved to the desk, began frantically opening drawers, shuffling through papers. His movements were erratic, panicked. "Where is it?" he muttered, his voice raw with fear. Where would he keep it? He was clearly looking for something specific, incriminating evidence, most likely. My father must have sent him to clear out anything damaging before authorities thought to search the house. Justin moved toward the safe. As he shifted the painting, a chilling realization washed over me. I needed to leave. Now, while he was distracted fumbling with the safe combination, I slowly edged toward the door, staying low, moving silently behind furniture. I had almost reached the doorway when his phone rang, startling us both. I froze as he answered. "Yes, I'm here now," he said, his voice tense. "Looking exactly where you said." "No, I haven't found it yet." "They what? When?" His voice rose in genuine alarm. "How many agents?" "Jesus." "Yes, I understand." He ended the call and slammed his fist against the wall. Damn it. Whatever he had just learned had clearly escalated the situation dramatically. As he turned back to the safe, I seized my opportunity and slipped out the door, hugging the wall, avoiding the familiar creaking floorboards I remembered from childhood. I made it to the side door and out of the house without detection. Once clear of the property, I checked my phone. 5 missed calls from Olivia and a text, "FBI at headquarters." Complete lockdown. Richard being questioned. It was happening even faster than I had anticipated. I called Olivia from a quiet coffee shop 2 miles from the estate. "What's the situation?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Agents everywhere," She replied in a hushed, urgent tone. They arrived with warrants for financial records going back 7 years. Richard is in the conference room with federal agents and company attorneys. Vanessa tried to leave the building, but was escorted back inside. And the board, the emergency session is in progress. Marcus is leading. They're discussing temporary leadership structure pending investigation. I absorbed all this, trying to process the sheer scale of it. Where are you now? Records department. They've asked us to facilitate document access. Stay safe, I told her. This will get uglier before it improves. My next call was to Ethan. I need to know if I should come in or stay away. Stay away, he advised immediately, his voice firm. The board knows you're the whistleblower, but it's better if you're not physically present while federal agents are conducting initial interviews. I've informed select agents that you are available to provide testimony when needed. Has my father figured it out yet? I asked, a chill running down my spine. Ethan's voice was grim. Yes. When agents mentioned the altered will, he apparently shouted something about you before his attorney shut him down. At 6 p.m., I checked into a hotel under a pseudonym, just as Ethan had advised. From this secure, anonymous location, I monitored developments through encrypted communications with my allies inside the company. The evening news ran the first, damning stories. Federal investigation at Lancaster Technologies, medical device giant facing fraud allegations, Lancaster CEO under investigation. None mentioned me specifically yet, but I knew that would come. I had provided the journalists with enough background that the full story would emerge in waves, each one more damaging than the last. At 9:12 p.m., my father, Richard, finally called again. Against my better judgment, I answered. Why? His voice was hoarse, ragged, barely recognizable. You know why. Do you have any idea what you've done? He screamed. The company won't survive this. The company will survive, I retorted, my voice cold and steady, without the fraud and corruption. He was silent for a moment, then, with icy fury, you planned this. All of it. Coming back to the company, gaining access, I came back to save what grandfather Arthur built, I interrupted, my own anger rising. I gave you chances to do the right thing. By destroying your own family? This company supports hundreds of employees. Patients depend on our products. Don't you dare pretend this is about employees or patients. I shot back, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion. This is about what you stole from the company, from shareholders, from me. His voice then shifted, surprisingly, turning pleading, a tone I had never, ever heard from him before. Sarah, please. Whatever you think I've done, we can resolve this privately as a family. We stopped being a family, I said, the words heavy with years of pain, the moment you decided I was a threat rather than your daughter. I paused, then added, or perhaps it was when you altered grandfather Arthur's will to disinherit me. Silence. Then, his voice hardening, you can't prove that. I already have. It's all in the hands of authorities now. I'll fight this, he growled, the brief vulnerability replaced by a renewed, venomous resolve. With every resource I have. Those resources are being frozen as we speak, I informed him flatly. I ended the call and turned off my phone. The die was cast. My evidence was with the authorities, the board, and soon, the public. There was no stopping what would come next. At the hotel room desk, I opened my laptop and reviewed one final email. It contained my formal statement to the board, requesting emergency appointment as interim CEO based on grandfather Arthur's documented intentions and my own undeniable qualifications. Marcus had helped draft it, believing the company desperately needed a Lancaster at the helm to weather the coming storm, but one untainted by the burgeoning scandal. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the send button. Once sent, I would be volunteering to step directly into the eye of the hurricane, to take responsibility for saving a company teetering on the verge of collapse, to face intense public scrutiny and inevitable backlash. I thought of grandfather Arthur's words, business is about more than profit. It is about purpose. My finger moved. I pressed send. My hotel room phone rang at 5:30 a.m., jarring me from a fitful, adrenaline-fueled sleep. It was Marcus. Turn on the news, he said, without preamble. I fumbled for the remote, my hands shaking slightly, and switched on the television. A somber news anchor was mid-sentence. Federal agents executed search warrants at both Lancaster Technologies headquarters and the Lancaster family estate late into the night. Sources confirm CEO Richard Lancaster and Chief Financial Officer Daniel Stone have been taken in for questioning. The screen flashed to footage of my father, Richard, being escorted to a black SUV, his face ashen, defiant. Vanessa followed behind him, flanked by agents on either side. Justin was notably absent from the footage. The board voted at 4 a.m., Marcus continued, his voice steady. Richard has been suspended pending investigation. Daniel Stone terminated. Your appointment as interim CEO was approved by a narrow margin. I sat on the edge of the bed, stunned, despite having set these very events in motion. When do they need me there? 9 a.m. Board meeting to formalize the transition. Federal agents want to interview you at 11. Press conference tentatively scheduled for 2 p.m. The machine was in unstoppable motion now. I'll be there. After a quick shower, I dressed with careful, deliberate consideration, a conservative navy suit, minimal jewelry, my hair pulled back to partially conceal the still tender bandage on my forehead. I needed to project unwavering stability and confidence, to appear neither as a victim nor a vindictive daughter. On the drive to headquarters, my phone buzzed continuously with messages and calls. The story had broken wide open overnight. 3 major business publications had run detailed exposés on the financial fraud, citing anonymous whistleblowers and company insiders. One had directly referenced the altered will, though, thankfully, without naming me specifically. The Lancaster Technologies parking lot was a chaotic scene of news vans and reporters. Security personnel escorted me through a side entrance, bypassing the media gauntlet. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Employees gathered in small, anxious groups, their conversations abruptly ceasing as I passed. Olivia met me at the executive elevator. They know it was you, she said quietly, her eyes full of concern. Not officially, but word has spread. How are the employees taking it? I asked, my gaze sweeping over the worried faces. Shocked, confused, afraid for their jobs, but also, she hesitated, there's relief among some. Your father's management style had become increasingly erratic. People have been walking on eggshells for months. The executive floor was eerily quiet, federal agents having commandeered several offices, boxes of documents stacked high in conference rooms. Marcus waited for me in what had been my father's office, now starkly stripped of all personal items. The initial financial assessment is worse than we thought, he said, closing the door firmly behind me. The fraud extends far beyond what even your evidence showed. Daniel Stone has apparently been cooperating with authorities since midnight, implicating your father in exchange for leniency. I nodded, unsurprised. The company's stock trading was halted before market open. We expect a 30 to 40% drop when it resumes. Major hospital chains are calling for reassurance about supply continuity. The FDA has requested emergency meetings regarding product safety. Any indication of actual safety issues? This was my greatest, most agonizing concern. Patient lives could be at risk. Initial review suggests the fraud was financial, not product-related. Your father may have been corrupt, but he wasn't stupid enough to risk liability for defective medical devices. Small comfort, perhaps, but critical. We spent the next hour preparing for the board meeting, reviewing talking points and transition plans. At 8:45 a.m., my phone rang again. Vanessa. Against my better judgment, I answered. How could you? She hissed, her voice raw with a potent mix of tears and rage. Your own father. He made his choices, I replied evenly. Years of them. They arrested him in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what this is doing to Justin? To me? Where is Justin, by the way? I asked, a flicker of genuine curiosity. I noticed he wasn't with you and father last night. A beat of silence. He's dealing with this in his own way. Translation, likely drunk or hiding. Vanessa, I stated, my patience wearing thin. I have a board meeting to attend. Was there something specific you needed? You will regret this, she said, her voice hardening, venomous. When the dust settles, you will have nothing and no one. Family is everything, Sarah. That, I responded, my voice firm and resolute, is exactly why I did this. For my real family. For what they built and what they believed in. I ended the call as Marcus signaled it was time for the board meeting. The boardroom was a crucible of tension, sharply divided between directors who had begrudgingly supported my appointment and those still fiercely loyal to my father. I entered, chin held high, and took the seat at the head of the table, the seat that had been my father's for 2 decades. "Good morning," I began, my voice clear and calm, projecting an authority I didn't entirely feel. "I recognize this is an unprecedented situation for Lancaster Technologies. I want to assure each of you that my singular priority is stabilizing this company, cooperating fully with all investigations, and, above all, ensuring the continued production of the life-saving devices our patients depend on." For the next hour, we addressed immediate, pressing concerns, communication strategies, leadership transition, regulatory compliance. I outlined a precise 90-day stabilization plan, emphasizing radical transparency and unwavering accountability. By the meeting's end, even the most skeptical directors seemed cautiously, tentatively supportive. At 11 a.m., I met with federal investigators. For 2 grueling hours, I meticulously walked them through my evidence, answered every question about company operations, and formally filed my whistleblower statement. They were particularly interested in the altered will and my father's intricate methods of concealing financial transactions. "We will need you to testify if this goes to trial," the lead investigator informed me, his gaze unblinking. "I understand," I replied, my voice steady. "I am prepared to do whatever is necessary." The press conference at 2 p.m. was a controlled spectacle. Standing at the podium, flanked by Marcus and the board chairman, I faced dozens of cameras and a ravenous horde of reporters. Lancaster Technologies has a 50-year history of developing medical devices that save lives, I began, my voice ringing with conviction. That mission remains unchanged. While we address serious allegations regarding financial improprieties under previous leadership, our commitment to patients, healthcare providers, and ethical business practices stands firm. I deftly deflected any questions about my father specifically, deferring to the ongoing investigation. When asked about my new role, I emphasized my qualifications and my lifelong, deeply personal connection to the company's founding mission. As the press conference concluded, a reporter, sharper than the rest, shouted, "Miss Lancaster, is it true you were physically assaulted by your father before reporting his crimes?" The entire room fell silent. The bandage on my forehead suddenly felt glaringly conspicuous. I met the reporter's gaze, my own unwavering. "I will not be discussing family matters. This is about Lancaster Technologies, its employees, and the patients who depend on our products." "Thank you." Back in the executive office, reports continued to flood in. The company stock had indeed plummeted 35% upon resuming trading. 3 executive vice presidents had resigned. Customers were demanding reassurances. Partners were invoking contract review clauses. Through it all, I maintained an outward composure, making decisions, directing resources, projecting a confidence I did not entirely feel. By evening, however, patterns of support had begun to emerge. Long-term employees rallied around the promise of renewed integrity. Industry partners who had known Grandfather Arthur expressed cautious optimism about my leadership. At 8 p.m., Olivia brought me dinner at my desk along with an update. "Justin has been located. He attempted to access sensitive servers before security removed him from the building. Ethan is handling the legal aspects." I nodded tiredly. "Any word on my father?" "Released on bail, but restricted from entering company property. The family estate has been designated a secondary crime scene. He and Vanessa are staying at their lake house." "And the employees?" Olivia's expression softened. "Doing better than expected. There were initial shockwaves, of course, but your afternoon address to staff helped considerably. People appreciate honesty after months of obvious gaslighting from leadership." Around 10 p.m., Ethan arrived with additional updates. "The federal case is expanding. They found connections to tax evasion through the offshore accounts. The prosecutor is talking potential plea deals to avoid trial." "Will he take one?" I asked, knowing my father's stubborn pride. His attorneys will push for it. 15 to 20 years, potential sentencing otherwise. The brutal reality of what I had set in motion hit me anew. My father, for all his flaws, facing prison in his 60s. A family shattered beyond any hope of repair. My own life, irrevocably altered. Having second thoughts? Ethan asked gently, reading my expression. No, I said after a moment, the word heavy with truth. Just processing the scope of it all. For what it's worth, he offered, what you did took extraordinary courage. Many people suspected problems, but looked the other way for years. I thought of the glass shattering around me. The decades of manipulation and betrayal. The legacy nearly destroyed by insatiable greed. It wasn't courage, I replied, my voice quiet but firm. It was necessity. By midnight, I finally left headquarters for my hotel. Security concerns made returning to my apartment inadvisable for now. As the car pulled away from the building, I saw the illuminated Lancaster Technologies sign, my family name, glowing against the night sky. For the first time in years, it felt like it truly belonged to me again. 6 months later. 6 months after the night my father shoved me through that glass door, I stood at the podium during our quarterly investor meeting. The boardroom was packed, analysts and major shareholders buzzing, eager to hear how Lancaster Technologies had weathered the storm. The past 2 quarters have shown remarkable resilience, I began, gesturing to the projection behind me. Stock values have recovered 60% from their low point. Our new ethical compliance framework has received industry recognition. And most importantly, not a single patient has experienced disruption in receiving our life-saving devices. The road to this moment had been arduous, brutal. The first month after the revelations was pure chaos. 3 class action lawsuits from furious shareholders, FDA audits of all production facilities, employee uncertainty leading to a 15% voluntary departure rate, and media scrutiny that dissected every agonizing detail of the Lancaster family drama. The criminal cases, surprisingly, had progressed swiftly. Daniel Stone, the former CFO, had accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony. 3 other executives followed suit. My father, Richard, initially vowed to fight all charges, but as evidence mounted relentlessly and his former allies abandoned him like rats from a sinking ship, his attorneys finally negotiated a complex agreement, guilty pleas to tax evasion and securities fraud in exchange for dismissal of more serious charges. He received a 7-year sentence, eligible for parole after 4. The financial penalties were severe. The family estate was seized as partial restitution. I hadn't spoken to him since his sentencing hearing, where he had stared straight ahead, a blank mask, refusing to meet my eyes as I delivered my victim impact statement. Vanessa had filed for divorce 2 weeks after his conviction, swiftly negotiating her own settlement to avoid any charges of complicity. She'd moved to Arizona, launching a small, forgettable skincare line that very carefully avoided any mention of her Lancaster connection. Justin had faced minor charges related to attempting to destroy evidence. He received probation and community service, then promptly disappeared to Europe, occasionally surfacing in social media posts from yacht parties and ski resorts, funded by whatever remaining resources he'd managed to squirrel away before the collapse. The company's transformation had been my singular, all-consuming focus. We brought in forensic accountants to identify every financial irregularity, established ironclad new compliance protocols, restructured the board to include medical ethics experts and patient advocates, and, crucially, redirected research priorities back to innovation rather than cost-cutting. Most meaningfully, we established the Alara Lancaster Foundation, named for my mother, dedicated to providing medical devices to underserved communities globally. It was exactly what she would have wanted. What grandfather Arthur had envisioned for the company's broader purpose. Moving forward, I continued, addressing the investors. We are launching 3 new product lines, developed under our revised research protocols. Clinical trials show unprecedented effectiveness rates, and early adopter hospitals report significant improvement in patient outcomes. Marcus, now chairman of the board, nodded approvingly from his seat. We had become true partners in this monumental rebuilding effort, his institutional knowledge complementing my vision for the future. Olivia had accepted a well-deserved promotion to Chief of Staff, her unwavering loyalty finally properly rewarded. Ethan, after staying with the company through the tumultuous transition, had accepted a position with the Justice Department's Corporate Fraud Division. We still maintained our friendship. Someone needs to catch the next Richard Lancaster before they do too much damage, he'd explained. After the investor meeting, I returned to my office, now completely redesigned to remove all traces of my father's imposing dark wood and hunting trophies. The space was open, filled with natural light, glass walls symbolizing the transparency I had fiercely brought to the company culture. The physical scars from that night had healed, though a faint line remained at my hairline, visible when I wore my hair up. The emotional landscape was far more complex. I had lost my family, yes, but I had, in the most profound sense, reclaimed my heritage. The company now truly reflected Grandfather Arthur's visionary spirit and my mother Alara's values. That evening, I visited my mother's grave for the first time in years. My father had actively discouraged these visits, another insidious way of diminishing her influence and memory. I placed white roses, her favorite, against the headstone. "I think you would be proud," I said quietly, a whisper to the rustling wind. Not of the scandal, not of the pain, but of rebuilding something worthy of their names. The wind rustled through the nearby trees, the only response, but somehow it was enough. Grandfather Arthur's journal had become a constant touchstone during the most difficult moments. One passage, in particular, had guided me through the darkest days of the transition. Business empires rise and fall, but integrity stands eternal. Lancaster Technologies must never value profit above purpose or power above people. If these principles are ever compromised, the company must be cleansed through truth, however painful that process might be. He had known, somehow, that such a moment might come. Perhaps he had seen tendencies in my father that concerned him, leading to his original intention to pass control directly to me. In the months since taking control, I had received hundreds of messages from employees sharing how the cultural transformation had affected them. Engineers now empowered to prioritize safety improvements, sales representatives relieved to promote products they genuinely believed in, manufacturing staff proud of new quality standards. These messages meant more than the financial recovery, more than the restored stock price or industry accolades. They represented the very human impact of choosing truth over comfortable lies, of valuing integrity above family loyalty when that loyalty demanded moral compromise. The path forward remained challenging, of course. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly. Some customers remained wary. Certain board members still occasionally questioned my experience. Media outlets occasionally revived the scandal for slow news days. But the foundation was solid, now built on truth rather than deception. The Lancaster name was being redefined. One decision, one product, one patient outcome at a time. In quiet moments, I sometimes wondered if my father ever reflected on what he had truly lost. Not just freedom or wealth, but the opportunity to be part of something genuinely meaningful, to contribute to a legacy far greater than himself, to know the profound satisfaction of success achieved honorably. I had learned that some forms of betrayal cannot be forgiven, only accepted and moved beyond. That family is defined by values shared, not merely blood connection. That the hardest choices are often the most necessary ones. And most importantly, I had learned that we are not defined by what others believe we deserve, but by what we know to be right and have the courage to defend. If you've ever faced a moment where standing for truth meant losing something precious, something you held dear, then I understand that struggle. Sometimes, the greatest victory comes only after the most painful sacrifice. Have you ever had to choose integrity over comfort, even when it shattered your world? I want to hear your story. Leave a comment below and share your experience. And if this journey resonated with you, if it sparked something within you, please subscribe for more real-life stories of overcoming betrayal and finding strength in adversity. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth is never determined by those who fail to see it.